Welcome, welcome everyone. Good morning. I am thrilled to have all of you here for the fifth in our six-part webinar series, Oregon Youth in Focus. As a reminder of our first several webinars, we have spent time thinking about our overarching framing of readiness and thriving. We dove in deeply on what it looks like to support this work across learning ecosystems, on how we think about this work for adolescents. Last time we were together, we talked about mental well-being for young people, and today we will be talking about trauma-informed practice ed, and next time we'll be closing out thinking about college and career readiness. I am Catherine Plog Martinez with Knowledge to Power Catalyst. I will be your host and facilitator for today, but I don't want to take up too much of your time hearing from me. I want to get us right to the heart of our time together. So I am very excited to invite Mandy Davis to join me on screen. Mandy is a professor of practice at Portland State University School of Social Work and a licensed clinical social worker. And she also serves as the director of Trauma Informed Oregon. And Mandy is going to kick us off with some framing around trauma informed practices. So, with that, Mandy, I will hand it off to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I am such a fan of all the work 4-H does and all the different ways they do it across the state of Oregon and elsewhere. So thank you for having me. I know some of you we've hung out before. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. And I always like to say what I'm doing. So I have your faces in one or some of your faces. I have your chat over here and I have a screen over here. So that's where my eyes will be moving through. So I am going to jump right in because we just have a few minutes. What I'm going to try to do is just talk a bit about kind of some introduction, some seed planting about what trauma-informed care is, so that as you listen to these amazing programs, you're starting to hear, oh, this is what trauma-informed care is. Because I think sometimes we talk about it, but people want to go, what is it? It's like, well, that's what it is. So I'm hoping to kind of create that space. And I'm going to end on what the positive experiences research is showing us so that you can listen to that too as you hear about those programs. This is quick. It's short. I talk fast. So Catherine's going to drop resources in around training throughout. There's a lot of availability to resource for you that I hope you'll access as you need to. All right, we're going to jump in. I always invite you to regulate in the way that you need to in this moment. You might need to upregulate if you're feeling a little tired, or you might need to take some deep breaths to kind of downregulate if you're feeling a little fizzy today. So I just want to invite you to take care of yourself and move your body and your spirit and your mind in any way you need to be as present as possible in this moment. Webinars are funny, time warpy things because I can't see you. And so we like, you're kind of talking to yourself. And so I just want to honor that in the space. I might move through slides differently as I monitor my own time. I want to check to see if your reaction buttons work because Zoom likes to update us every other day and things work or don't work depending on the day. But if anyone yeah, oh, I see some flying, clapping hands. Excellent. I just want to let you know that I'm a big fan of emojis because in a webinar space, it's a way for us to relate, which is important for our central nervous system. So throughout, I might be like, hey, throw me an emoji. So feel free to do that throughout. And then as well as you have access to the chat, feel free to be in that chat lively. As you would like to, because relationship is kind of the core of trauma-informed care. All right, so what is trauma? Yeah, it's kind of a big question. So what I'm really going to do in this brief amount of time is just ask you to think, what is trauma? And Catherine, can you remind me, do people have chat access?
They sure do.
Okay, cool. So if you want to, just as a way to be involved a bit, if you want to put in the chat, what are some words that you might associate with the word trauma? I'm going to take a deep breath and pay attention to the chat for a minute. So I only see host and, oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. Suicide, divorce. Yep. Excellent. Yeah. Moving frequently. Yeah. Neglect, fear. Absolutely. Yeah. Adverse experiences, fire, natural disasters. Absolutely. Some of that's getting activated right now, right? Overwhelming shock. Yeah. So I want you to keep those coming, and I just want you to start to think for yourself. How would you define trauma if somebody asked you? Think about how your parents define trauma. Think about how your grandparents define trauma, right? That word can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I do want you to kind of keep those definitions coming or words coming as you go through. Because when we talk about trauma-informed care, it's kind of a requirement to do trauma-informed care that we learn to often we need to broaden our lens of how we define trauma. Maybe not, because I don't know how you define it yet, but oftentimes we need to broaden our lens well, what we often have been taught or our intake forms say that trauma actually is or what it means. The work that we do at Trauma Informed Oregon, we use the SAMHSA's definition of trauma, which is three E's, which is the event, the experience, and the effect. And this is our way of kind of broadening that lens because we often talk about the event, right? A divorce, right? Some of the things you mentioned here, a fire, those type of things. And then there's your experience to that event. And I think these are the things we're less likely to talk about or capture in our work because we also want to talk about the effect, right? Because so some of you know me, know that divorce is a really great example of the event of divorce can be traumatizing, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's liberating to one person. Maybe the experience of getting divorced was where the stress came from. Maybe the experience was fine, but maybe if it propelled you into economic deprivation or caused you to move, then it's the effect of the divorce. So I just want to always start these conversations with the idea of what is trauma is an important place to start as you think about in your organization, in your program, in your county, in your community, how that word is defined. At Trauma Informed Oregon, we want to make sure we're including things like systemic trauma, historical trauma, individual, collective, intergenerational. There's a lot of words associated to this word trauma. And in some groups, I don't even use the word trauma. I use adversity or toxic stress. So I want you to kind of leave thinking about, oh, how do we define trauma and how might we want to do that? So now I want to ground us. And so if we think about what trauma is, and you're going to go off thinking about that, we're now going to define what trauma informed care is. And what's most important to me about this definition are those first few words, which says a program, organization, or system. Trauma informed care is an organizational framework, is an organizational approach that uses knowledge about trauma and applies it to our policies, our practices, our procedures, our physical environments. But it's about the organization. So, an organization is trauma informed if number one, you realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand multiple paths of recovery. And this is important. Like, what is your localized data? What does trauma look like in your community, in your location, in your program, and those you serve? Number two, after you realize that it actually happens, you need to recognize the signs and symptoms. And those are in those you serve. What does toxic stress or adversity look like in a 15-year-old you serve in the way that you serve them? But also, we want you to know what that adversity and toxic stress looks like in the staff, right? So, in those you serve, as well as yourself, if you're a staff member or a program person, and as well as the other systems you work with. So that we're starting to recognize, we're going to start to see behavior through that lens, right? So the behavior is understood through this lens of toxic stress, adversity, and trauma. Number three, we want you to respond. And I like to joke a lot that I work in a university and we love to realize things and recognize things. We like to tell you how big the problem is and what it looks like, and then we exit stage left. We're like, good, now you go deal with it, right? So trauma informed care actually wants you to lean in and respond. Like you should leave today and do something differently that's more trauma informed. The key is we want you to respond through your policies, procedures, and then your practice. So we're going to ask you to look at your HR practices, your mental health day practices for staff, right? How you hire people, how you train people, where they work, how they work. All of those things are going to be involved in a trauma-informed organization. And Catherine, at any point, I want you to know there is an organizational assessment tool we have for you as you start to think about what all this is. So that is available to you to use at any point. And then the fourth R, you're going to start to learn the trauma informed movement likes threes and fours, and it loves R's. So the fourth R is we want you to resist re-traumatization. Now, there are plenty of us that do work in which the work we do is going to cause new trauma or activate old trauma. And when that happens, we want to know how to mitigate that. But to the extent you can even just start today asking from the first point of entry of whatever your day or service looks like to the exit of that day or service, what are the times or spaces where people might get activated, meaning their stress response gets activated. And then you look at those things. Is there anything we can do differently about that squeaky door or small lobby or the smell in the space or intake paperwork or those type of things? So the four R's to trauma informed care. And I want you to kind of hold these because as you listen to people doing the work in programs, you're going to hear these things kind of popping up in different ways. I always feel like it's really important to distinguish the difference of trauma specific service and trauma informed care. And we talk about this, but it often gets confusing, especially in policy and larger entities who get confused by this. So trauma-specific services are those interventions we do with individuals, families, and groups. We usually do them to either promote post-traumatic growth or skill building or to reduce traumatic symptomology. Individual, family, or group. They usually come with acronyms and reimbursement, right? They come with things like EMDR, eye motor desensitization reprocessing, or TFCBT, trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, those type of things. That is different than trauma informed care, which means an organization is taking in information, is learning about trauma and adversity, its impact on those they serve and themselves, and doing their services differently with that information. So, what's very important to listen to about this is that we believe everyone should be trauma informed. Not everyone needs to do trauma specific services. So, the DMV needs to be trauma informed. I'm going to throw out another one, and you can maybe give me an emoji if you agree or have feelings about this one. Social Security Administration offices need to be trauma informed. So I'm going to just stop and let's there we go. Okay, cool. Thank you. Right. Airports need to be trauma. So you can think about all the spaces and yeah, thanks, Leah. Right. So think about your county and your locations. Are there certain spaces you're like, oh, we need to wrap this around here, right? The library, whatever it may be. Everyone needs to be trauma informed, but I don't want to get therapy at the Social Security Administration building. That TSS, I'm going to go. You're going to have Morrison here today, right? Morrison provides trauma specific services and trauma informed care. So you're going to start to see that show up about you need to do TIC. If you don't have access to a trauma specific service, you need to, like a referral or a partnership or collaboration is going to be important. Because sometimes people get nervous because they think we're asking them to do TSS and we're not. All right, so why trauma informed care is so important. This is what I get up in the morning, I live this and breathe this, is really about this last point on this slide, which is that trauma impacts how people approach services. So what I want you to know, if you take nothing away from these brief moments, I want you to take away that trauma informed care is an engagement tool. I'm going to stop there and just let that sit in your hippocampus a minute. It is an engagement tool. And here's why we believe that so strongly is we found when we started this work 10 years ago is that there was great trauma specific services or just good services out there for people, but a lot of people weren't getting there. And what we found that was stopping that or have a barrier to that was experiences of trauma with those systems, with what had happened last time, with transport, with a lot of reasons these things weren't happening. So trauma-informed care creates an environment where people will be able to show up and flourish in the services you have to offer. So I talk to faith communities about trauma-informed care helps people get in the door, right? So we're going to think about it as an engagement tool. And here's why. And I know many of you have seen or maybe heard of the Dan Siegel's kind of hand-brain model. Let me just ask that. Has anybody heard of this hand-brain model from Dan Siegel about the flip lid? Cool. Thank you for those reactions. So I'm just going to use that real quick. If you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, there's resources available to you, but it's a great way to think about this because Dan Siegel teaches us that, he tells you that your thumb is your amygdala, this is your prefrontal cortex, and he says this is your brain. Now, here's the big important question for all of you. How many of you, when I say this is your brain, and this is generational, hear in your brain, this is your brain on drugs? So let me get some emojis around that. Yeah, yeah. So some of you are around with the Just Say No commercial that fried up some eggs and it made a really bad noise on a stove and it said, this is your brain on drugs, just say no. Now, right now, you're like, why is this person talking about drugs? I don't understand. So here's a big connection I want to make for you. If you've never seen that commercial, you didn't have that thought. You were just like, okay, Mandy, this is your brain. What I want you to take away that is so critically important to trauma informed care is our brains, our bodies, our minds, our spirits react to what's in front of us based on our history with what's in front of us. When I walk into a space, when I go to a webinar about trauma informed care, no matter what I'm doing, my brain and body are going, what do I know about this? And let me get ready. So one of your best questions you can ask people is, what was your last time in this building getting this service, going to a 4-H? Like ask that question because the last time is what they're coming to you with. If the last time was great and lovely and affirming, they're going to ease in that way. If the last time was scary and uncomfortable, they're going to ease in that. They're going to be in that space. Okay, so this is why it's engagement tool. We believe people are showing up with their lids already flipped a lot of the time. Transportation, difficulty, fear, whatever it may be. And then what happens is we're in our kind of regulated brain is that oftentimes people come in dysregulated and then we get dysregulated. So what happens, and if you don't know this already, dysregulated people cannot help dysregulated people. So the concern when we're both in amygdala to amygdala conversations is the person that loses out is the person with the least amount of power. So trauma-informed care at its best is helping staff and employees and program folks stay as regulated as possible so that we are able to be helpful. And then when we dysregulate, we have something to do about that. We can tag team out or get support from our organization. So that's really trauma-informed care at its best, is keeping our workforce and our providers well enough to be able to be helpful to those that we serve. All right, I'm going to move through some stuff. I'm going to just bring this out again. This is all on our website, everything I'm talking about today, so you can have access, download, use, please. But just another reminder about the outcome of a trauma-informed organization is engagement. So you're looking at staff retention, staff wellness, you're looking at do those who are supposed to show up, right? And we know people will do this if they feel safe, empowered, valued, and cared for, if they believe the organization has their back in their best interest and they trust the organization. So those are things we actually measure, the kind of the felt experience of those who access your services and of your staff. Those things happen through your policy, your practices, your physical environment, and your personal interactions. So just kind of keep having that reminder. Trauma-informed care, that's its goal is engagement, which means your services have to have something to offer people, right? People need healthcare, they need housing, they need mentorship. They need it to be done in a trauma-informed way. Trauma-informed is grounded in two big kind of things. One is in the principles. So trauma-informed care practices the following principles of safety, physical and psychological, transparency and trust, peer support. But peer support means the meaningful inclusion of those with lived experience. So you're talking to including hiring people who've been in your services before and having that be part of the work. In collaboration and having voice and choice, and everything is done with a culturally responsive and sustaining lens. We're not diving into any of this today, but I want you to know these are important because if people call and be like, hey, is this trauma informed to close the clinic at Friday at 3? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's walk it through the principles. To what extent does it promote or hinder safety for staff and for those you serve? And every single one of these is always for staff and for those served. And then we're constantly kind of making decisions based on that. The science of trauma informed is also often known as near science. So it includes the science of neurobiology, so neurobiology, how your brain develops and is impacted, epigenetics, adverse childhood experience, resilience, and recovery. So I just want you to know there's a lot of information that kind of funnels us into the work that we do, and happy to, just share more about how you can get that. I think, so I'm going to talk about this and then I'm going to skip a few things and talk about some buffering stuff as we move into the next part. But I just want you to know that sometimes we want to remember what trauma-informed care is not. So real quickly, it's not about justifying behavior that is unsafe. We always say behavior trauma is an explanation to behavior, not an excuse to behavior, right? It's not about just smiling more or being nicer. It's having true compassion and understanding. It's not the end all be all. It needs to be in partnership with other lenses and kind of focuses, right? It's not just a training, right? It's not something new. You are likely already doing trauma informed, and my work with you all has shown that to be true throughout. So just kind of know that as you go through. And again, you can have access to these slides as we leave. I want to say this as we move into positive experiences, that in the middle of COVID, the California Surgeon General, I think, talked so simply and powerfully about the impact on COVID on children and adolescents at the time. And what they said was this generation was seeing more than any other was an increase of stressors while simultaneous decrease in buffers. And what's important about that is we can't always change the stressor, but we can always add to the buffer. And I see so much of your work is adding to those buffers, right? And so let's talk about what those buffers are. And I'm going to skip a few slides for those of you who have that brain or like, wait, don't worry. So I want to move us into this HOPE research. So when we look at the healthy outcomes of positive experience research, what we see is 4 building blocks. And I think those of you in your work will notice this as part of your programming. 4 building blocks of HOPE is relationship, environment, engagement, and opportunity. Those are the 4 things that encompass what's called a positive experience. Now, what we know about those positive experiences now, and it's been research that just was like, made me get excited. That takes a lot sometimes around research. But what it said, what this research says is, regardless of having adverse childhood experiences, and we can't go into that, but if you don't know about that, we'll get you information. But let's say you have three adverse childhood experiences. I have three adverse childhood experiences. The more positive experiences I have, the significantly better off I'll be all the way into my adulthood. So it mitigates those impacts. This is powerful because if you look at those positive childhood experiences on this slide, I think you'll notice work you do. And I think you'll hear this in what you're getting ready to hear from program folks. Felt able to talk to their family about their feelings, felt the family stood by them, participated in community traditions, felt a sense of belonging in high school, felt supported by friends, had at least two non-parent adults who took genuine interest, and felt safe and protected by an adult in their home. So think about which of those you are touching on and you are actually kind of activating in the work that you do, because they're incredibly important. Incredibly important. If you might notice, none of them say things like EMDR or TFCBT. You might notice they're all relationship based, which is something I don't think we fund enough. And so we need to be thinking about that as we do this work. So in trauma informed care, we talk about how we do the work is the work. How we do the work is the work. Constantly, how we do the work is the work. I want to end you on just a reminder that trauma informed care is about the whole organization. Policies, practices, procedure, HR, environment, car policies, all of the things. So as you move into this next part where you get to hear from people who are doing trauma informed care, I want you to listen. I want you to listen because a lot of times trauma informed care isn't called trauma informed care. And I don't think it needs to be, right? But we know the elements are there. So start to listen to how these programs are promoting relationship, connection to environment, engagement, opportunities, safety, transparency, lived experience, all these things. Just I want you to notice because then I'm going to join you again and we're going to talk about what we heard and how it connected to this work around trauma informed care. So Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you while I sit back and listen to participants to hear the great work in the field.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mandy. As always, so much jumping out at me, but I really appreciate the reminder that this is organizational and system work, and also that reminder that we can't reduce the stressors, but we can really think about increasing the buffers. And I'm excited to listen for those listen fors that you have outlined for us. So we'll see you back in just a little bit. And I'm going to invite three wonderful panelists to join us on screen. First, I'm going to invite Lauren Rogers, who many of you may know as Otter, her camp name. Lauren is the Professional Development Coordinator for the OSU Extension Outdoor School Program. And I'm going to invite Caroline to join us as well. Caroline is with Morrison Child and Family Services and serves as the program manager for the Sanctuary Department. And last but not least, we will add Yasmin. There is Yasmin, and Yasmin is with Oregon Natural Resources Program at Oregon State University. She serves as the Associate Director. And I am very excited to hear from all of you about what trauma-informed practice looks like in your realm and in your organization. So we'll start just by having you each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your role within your organization supporting trauma-informed practices. So Caroline, I think we'll start with you.
Hi, thank you so much, Catherine. Um, I have a wonderful job. We have a whole department called the Sanctuary Department that's dedicated to supporting education and the integration of trauma-informed practices and care throughout Morrison Child and Family Services. And is this my time to just continue, or is this my brief introduction, Catherine?
I think, tell us just a little bit about what trauma-informed practice looks like within, and
Right.
trauma-informed care looks like within
Okay.
your organization.
Yeah. So all of us at Morrison, we recognize the experience of trauma and adversity as universal to the people we serve, but also to many of us working in this field. We've all experienced it and or are currently experiencing trauma and adversity, and that this really deeply impacts mental and physical well-being of individuals and communities. So we want the whole organization to be able to engage in practices and create environments and be in environments that promote safety, trust, healing, and empowerment. We have 10 different programs, up to 450 staff people, and serve up to 8,000 people in a given year. So the impact of embedding trauma-informed care and practices is really quite tremendous. So we have our sanctuary department, which provides learning experiences, coaching, and consultation for every staff member on the sanctuary model. And this sanctuary model, it's a blueprint and for clinical as well as organizational change. And it promotes safety and recovery from adversity through the active creation of a trauma-informed community. And Morrison became certified in this model in 2023. So by implementing this model, our goal really is to replace burnout, compassion fatigue, and toxic stress with a renewed culture of self-care, of workplace wellness, heightened creativity, as well as overall resilience.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks. We're going to dig in a little bit more on that organizational approach in just a minute. Lauren, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Rogers at Outdoor School. I go by Otter, and I'm the professional development coordinator with OSU Extension Outdoor School Service. I actually got to first go to outdoor school when I was in high school. I went to outdoor school outside of Eugene, and for the last decade, I directed Camp Tamarack, which is an outdoor school provider located in Central Oregon. In my current work, I now have a more zoomed out view of outdoor school in Oregon. So our program supports outdoor school across the whole state by providing funding to school districts so that fifth and sixth grade students can attend multi-day, science-based, oftentimes overnight outdoor school experiences. Currently, almost 40,000 kids go to outdoor school every single year. And it's been a part of Oregon's landscape for almost 60 years, but it looks really different in every region across the state. So some programs are run by classroom teachers, some include parent chaperones, some have visiting natural resource professionals, while others include a combination of professional staff and high school students who serve as cabin counselors and activity leaders. In my role at OSU Extension Outdoor School, I really focus on building skills and capacity of all the humans who make outdoor school happen. So that's school district folks, that's teachers, program providers, and high school leaders, especially around creating inclusive and supportive learning environments.
Right. Thank you. Yasmin.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm excited to be here. So, as Catherine already mentioned, I'm the Associate Director at the Oregon Natural Resources Education Program, or ONREP for short. And the mission and vision of ONREP is to support our formal and non-formal pre-K 12 educators throughout Oregon with professional development, specifically focusing on natural resources and environmental education. My background is both in environmental sciences and then also mental health. So when I was hired in this role 5 years ago, there was absolutely no mention of mental health in my job description or any kind of trauma-informed practices that I might be doing or that we would offer in our workshops. But 5 years ago was the beginning of the pandemic. And so educators were saying to us, like, your workshops are great, but really we don't have capacity to think about environmental education right now. We are in crisis mode. We are really focusing on our own mental health and how we can support the mental health of our students during this absolutely crazy, unprecedented time for a lot of people. So luckily, because I had just been hired and have this experience in the mental health field, I was able to step up and say, oh, no problem. I can support you with that. And so I started offering workshops, professional development workshops that combined um, nature and being outdoors with tools and strategies to support your mental health. So really, where is that overlap between environmental education and again, mental health and everything, framed in the educational setting. And those workshops quickly became some of our best attended workshops, and people were asking for more of this, please. And so today, that is kind of a big part of my job. I offer trainings, workshops, do lots of conference presentations, and write about, again, that intersection between mental health and nature. And I love it.
Excellent. Well, that actually tees up the first question that's on my mind. In our last session, we talked about that intersection and connection between mental well-being and the outdoors. And I wonder for both Lauren and Yasmin, in your work, How do you think about that connection in terms of being trauma informed?
Yeah, so what I think is so powerful about outdoor school, not only is it a really cool like hands-on science experience, kids get to be outside learning science, but it's also a really powerful experience where you get to learn to live in community. So whether you're like a fifth grader and you're canoeing for the first time, or you're a high school counselor who's suddenly in charge of watching 11-year-olds in a cabin and being the sole responsible adult there, right? You're all taking healthy risks. You're building confidence through practicing that healthy risk. You're learning skills like communication, problem solving, right? Whose idea gets picked for the skit for campfire? Those are all really like important and powerful skills you're practicing in this small community. So oftentimes at outdoor school also, there's like these layered support systems where high school students are paired up and supported by staff mentors that coach them and support them throughout the week. Those high school students then get to support the campers. So it has like this ripple connection and care that really does like help support mental well-being while kids are on site. Uh, of course, being outside for a lot of people has great benefits to mental health, but it's not always automatic for everybody. And so for some students, outdoor school feels like exciting and it's fun. It's camp, right? What's not to love about camp? But that's not true for all kids, right? For other kids, it can be overwhelming and it can even feel unsafe. New food, unfamiliar routines, new people, different expectations of how you show up. It is like it's a school program, but it's you show up very different at outdoor school than you do in a classroom. And oftentimes, especially post COVID-19, being at outdoor school is kind of the first time kids are away from home oftentimes now. So there's just a lot of anxiety. And so when students bring their trauma or anxiety or what's having them feel unsafe or uncomfortable, that can really impact how they show up and participate, which is why being trauma informed and having that understanding is so important. And so at OSU Extension Outdoor School, we're really trying to help adults create systems that support all students and not just those who already feel safe in outdoor spaces. So that includes preparing students ahead of time, creating predictable routines, offering student voice and choice within program design or just like the day-to-day at within programs, making sure that there's space for that emotional safety alongside the fun campy things. And outdoor school, it's been a part of Oregon for 60 years, and it's a deeply valued tradition, but it's something that we're starting to adapt, right? We're starting to change as youth and adolescents are changing as well. And so historically, there was this idea that this is how outdoor school works, and kids and families, you just need to adjust to fit into this system, and this is what it is. But we're really working to shift that narrative and trying to move away from that and saying, okay, so how can we change on site within our programs so that students feel that sense of belonging and feel that sense of safety? And so that includes now like trying to collaborate more with families, trying to collaborate with communities to really co-create a version of outdoor school that helps everyone, all the learners who are there in that space.
I love that. Really connects back to what Dr. Davis was saying about the history that kids are bringing with them to outdoor school, right? And are they coming in
Yeah.
regulated or dysregulated? And how are you really prepared to respond no matter what and in a way that everyone else can stay regulated and supporting them? Yasmin, what
Mhm.
would you add from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have found that once you know about trauma and its pervasiveness, you can never unknow it. So there's no going back. And through my work and my personal experiences, I've come to understand that trauma touches all of our lives in some capacity, whether it's supporting a loved one or students that, are facing adversity or something is going on in our own life or our community, our region, even the world. The pandemic was a global crisis. And so nowadays for ONREP, it's just a given that we apply a trauma informed approach all the time with everyone. It doesn't really matter, is it just this one workshop for educators because we're doing a workshop on fire? No, we apply it across the board. because we never know. As I think we've already kind of said a little bit, Mandy and Otter, like we don't know what someone is facing at home, and maybe they don't even understand it, and they don't know, oh, I'm feeling a certain way, but I can't pinpoint what that, situation is or what is my brain doing. When the lid is flipped, we cannot access that rational thinking anymore, and so we can't do the problem solving. So for us, it's really important that whether we're writing an email to an educator or again, designing a workshop, how we're communicating with the public, but also in our team, we're a small team of 3 people, how do we interact with each other? Even in our staff meetings, in our team meetings, we use that trauma-informed approach because using it can never do harm. It can really only benefit everyone, regardless of their trauma history.
It's great. It's great. And Caroline, Yasmin just started to talk about it, right, with their small team of 3. But I'm wondering, we're thinking about ultimately wanting to be trauma informed in our care and our practices with young people, with the clients that we're serving, with the participants in our program. But we heard that this has to be an organizational approach. What is that link between being trauma informed in our practice with young people and being trauma informed as an organization?
Oh, yeah. And I love that, Yasmin, that being trauma informed just helps everybody. It doesn't harm anyone, right? And so why not do it? Um, Trauma can affect entire systems, right? And supporting youth and children and families starts with supporting the adults who care for them. If staff are overwhelmed or unsupported, that stress can unintentionally get passed to the people that they serve. And so when staff are supported well, they're much more able, right, to show up as their best selves for the youth, children, and families that they work with. Um, so to do this effectively, really, the entire culture needs to be um, the entire organization needs to be embedded, right, with trauma-informed culture. And so what that looks like for us is we want the staff, and this is from leadership to direct care staff, right? We want everyone to understand the impact of trauma and prioritize safety and connection and empowerment through policies, through hiring practices, through staff supports, even through the physical environments. And the sanctuary model really provides a framework for us to have commitments to follow. There are 7 commitments to follow that are trauma-informed practices around promoting emotional intelligence and open communication and democracy and social learning, social responsibility, promoting nonviolence and growth and change. The ability to and space and time and practice to reflect on the work that we do, on how we feel about the work that we do, really helps us to provide better services. It helps us to regulate ourselves. We always talk about the brain, right? And as Mandy said, when 2 brains are like this, nothing can get done. And so one of the best interventions for a staff person is to come with a regulated brain, and then that can help the people that we serve to regulate as well. So we have implemented this model throughout the organization. Everyone receives a 16-hour training in the sanctuary model initially upon employment. And then we have lots of offerings throughout every month. We have social learning circles for staff as well as for supervisors and managers. And this is a place to come together to practice regulation techniques, to learn from one another, to hear about what's going on in different programs and really feel connected, and to offer support and receive support from peers. We also offer 2 virtual brain break mindful moments twice a week to help us all practice regulation in regulation of our nervous systems in community. We provide reflective consultations on the many concepts of sanctuary. We really encourage people to wrestle with the concepts and tenets and tools of sanctuary to help integrate them, to help them make sense for one another and for teams. And the tools really help us to slow down and to reflect. And that's where the best learning is, right? The tools help us to communicate openly and effectively, to problem solve, and to tend to our own self-care as well as the collective wellness of our teams. We are really supportive of workplace wellness. So not, after work, go and take care, but integrating self-care practices into our daily work, that it's really an ethical imperative, to quote Laura Vandernoot Lipsky, right? It's an ethical imperative that we integrate caring techniques for ourselves and for our teams within the work we do during our work days.
It's just such a powerful approach, both to thinking about how individuals are supported and staying regulated, to thinking about that community and the systems. I really even appreciate your taking it to the hiring process, right? That it is every aspect of the organization, not just those that we maybe think about in terms of the direct service. Lauren and Yasmin, in each of your roles, you focus on professional learning. I think even sometimes together, thinking about professional learning. How do you think about supporting adults in building skills to be more trauma informed? Maybe when they are in an organization that's taking this approach, but maybe they're the first one in their organization thinking about it. What does that look like?
As I mentioned, I offer trainings specifically on how to implement a trauma-informed approach in educational settings. And for me, I always first need to understand the why before I figure out the what. So I like to start with a little bit of a brain lesson, go into the neurobiology. So how does adversity affect our brain? And specifically for students or educators, how does it affect impulse control? Being able to sit still, making those logical, rational decisions. Because I think once educators can understand what might be happening in their students' brains and nervous system in their body when they're exhibiting misbehavior, and I put it in quotes because I think that term is misleading, but because that behavior could actually be a trauma response that the student is dealing with, as opposed to conscious defiance. So I think once educators can understand that and have that background information, then they can reach for the appropriate tools and strategies to then help the students regulate their nervous system and maybe regulate their own. So a big part of all of my trainings is always to address educator well-being, educator nervous systems, and make sure that they understand just what Mandy already talked about. If the you first have to regulate your own nervous system before you can support other people to achieve that balance again, calm, whatever it might be. And so that's a big part of my trainings. And then I also wrote this kind of long document. It's the Trauma Informed Toolkit. It's a resource for educators because as I was doing these trainings, I realized I really wanted to give them some kind of resource that they could refer back to that was specifically for educators in environmental education. And I couldn't find one. So I was like, well, I guess I'll write it myself. But in that toolkit, and yes, thank you for putting it in the chat. I used an existing lesson plan of fire and put a trauma-informed lens over that lesson plan because often educators, they don't have time to write a new lesson from scratch that is fully, trauma-informed principles. They have existing lessons and activities that they already are familiar with that's easier to use. And so I don't think they have to rewrite the whole curriculum. They can apply that trauma-informed lens to modify a lesson. And even small strategies and tools that you embed and small modifications can make a really big difference. So in that toolkit, the link is in the chat, is that example of a modified lesson. And so you had also asked about, and it's like maybe a more specific example of an impact that I could think of or that I came across. And what comes to mind is more often than not, when educators attend these workshops, they come because they're here for their students. They come to learn the tools and strategies to support their students. And at the end, they will, share with me that, oh my God, I didn't realize it would actually impact me. And I now understand myself better, or my children, family dynamics. It's impossible once you know it's you can't only apply trauma-informed strategies in your professional setting. It's going to be pretty normal and automatic that you're also going to start applying it to your personal life, because it's all interconnected. And yeah, and as I said, once you know, and there's no going back.
Otter, what would you add?
Yeah, I just keep thinking about Mandy talking about trauma-informed care as an engagement tool. And I think it's an engagement tool, and it's something that, well, in one of our trainings integrating outdoor school into the classroom, we're getting teachers to practice zooming out and thinking about what might help their students be successful before they even go to outdoor school. And so we do a reflection activity where we have teachers brainstorm what are some fears or anxieties, things that might come up before your students even go to outdoor school. And then we talk about what that might look like and what are supports that we could create to make the experience more successful. But then we encourage them to actually go to their students and to do that same reflection activity with their students. So they're really getting their students to talk about what they're feeling excited about. Sometimes kids have siblings who went to outdoor school, so they're really excited. Sometimes no one in the family has gone to outdoor school, so there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety. And so having that debrief with the class, really validating their students' feelings, and then involving the students in what the problem solving could look like, preparing them for what outdoor school, what to expect from that outdoor school, um, and also activating any school-based support systems prior to going outdoor school, connecting with families. Hey, your student mentioned this. I don't know if they've talked to you about that, about outdoor school. So really shifting from reacting to when things come up at outdoor school to really let's create systems of care and trust and preparation prior to outdoor school even beginning. So that's like one of the little, I don't know, just helping those teachers zoom out, right? I think for some teachers too, they've been going to outdoor school, they've been a teacher for 10 years. Oh yeah, I know what outdoor school is like. But then they forget sometimes, oh, but this little fifth or sixth grader doesn't know anything, right? And so helping them translate and communicate that experience beforehand.
Yeah, I really appreciate, as both of you were talking, that there's so much of a proactive approach, right? That it's about thinking ahead, but also that it can be really simple practices, right? It can sound so overwhelming to think about being trauma informed, but it really starts with those simple practices. So, Yasmin shared an example of that impact of a trauma informed approach. Caroline and Otter, I'm wondering if either of you have an example of impact that you'd like to share to close us out.
Sure. When you asked this question, staff person came to mind recently who came to our mindful moments for a week, 2 mindful moment breaks in community, learning about calming techniques. And when they talked with me the following week, they said, last week I was so dysregulated and so unmotivated. And I'm so glad I showed up to see my colleagues and to practice these techniques because it helped me to become more grounded and to feel more present and to have more compassion for myself to be able to do my work. And now they are using the invitation to start meetings with calming techniques with the people that they serve. So it's this beautiful, positive, parallel process.
That is really powerful. Very powerful. Otter, do you have something that comes to
Yeah,
mind?
yeah, thanks. So one example I thought of was from my time at Camp Tamarack when I was the camp director there. And it was how we approached mental health support. And so not only just for students, the campers that get to come to outdoor school, but for our staff and high school students. And this has come up multiple times in the session, but talking about kind of how you support those humans who support the kids, right? So we were really lucky. We had a former staff member who had worked at Tamarack for about 5 years. Then they went on and became a licensed mental health professional, and they worked full time as a middle school counselor. But then they also served as like an on-call therapist for during our outdoor school and summer camp season. Um, and so if a staff member or a high school leader or a camper needed support, before camp or at home after outdoor school. She was available for private sessions over the phone or on Zoom. There was no limit to the amount of sessions people could access, and Camp Tamarack covered that cost entirely. We also made sure that all of our staff knew about Oregon State University's free community counseling resources if they were looking for more longer term, no cost mental health support. And so even if people, high school students or staff, didn't access the counseling services that we provided, I think just knowing that, like the signaling that provided that we were invested in their well-being, um, really helped and supported our community overall. At camps, there can sometimes be this culture of glorifying self-neglect in service to kids, right? We're doing this for the kids, and we're like, some people are still working like 16-hour days at camp, and it's like, we're doing this for the kids, right? But you can't pour from empty cup, right? And it came up, you can't regulate and support someone when you're dysregulated. And so creating those systems of care and support for the adults really became really foundational in how we showed up for youth and allowed youth to be able to thrive at outdoor school.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you to the three of you for really helping to bring this to life and for all the work that you're doing on a regular basis. I am going to invite Dr. Davis to join us on screen and just close us out with a little bit of reflection on what you heard and what is standing out to you.
Okay, yeah, I have like 4 pages of notes. Just saying. I'm going to put it into 5 things I heard. So I hope, and again, in the chat, I'd love for you to kind of honor that what you heard by saying anything you heard that was around the principles or relationship or engagement or little takeaways so that it sinks into your hippocampus as you leave here. So I'd love for you to light up the chat in those ways of things that you were going to take away. There were really, I think, 5 things that I want to that came up for me that I was listening. One is that idea that trauma-informed care creates inclusive environments. So I think Otter, so much of that's happening. And I love the idea you're like, it used to be outdoor school was like this, because we also thought the brain was like this. And then we realized the brain actually changes and grows. And so we have to change and grow with it. So I appreciate the idea that as we do that, we create environments where different people and all people can show up in different ways, right? Number 2 is the universal precaution. So I heard all 3 of you talk about trauma-informed. We say this, trauma-informed care is necessary and critical for those who've experienced trauma, and it's lovely for everyone. So we don't say you're gonna, you've got trauma, you go here. We're just gonna do trauma-informed care for the entire system, and so that's an important thing. And to integrate it, Yasmin, your example of kind of like, oh, I got this. So we're gonna integrate it into, right, the work that we're doing already. So you may never use the words trauma-informed care, and you can do trauma-informed care without those words. 3 is that interpersonal. So both Carolyn and Yasmin, you talked about the interpersonal connection, right? And just the living it within your own staff and with each other. Trauma-informed Oregon, we talk about the trauma-informed care lives at the intrapersonal, your own, like, what are you showing up with? What's your stuff? What's your history? How are you? The interpersonal, and then the organizational. So we need policies around wellness. We also have to participate in those wellness, so it's like, it's constantly swimming together. So I think it's a really important framework is the intra-org. 4 is that everyone gets the information. Everyone gets the information, the foundational information about trauma-informed care. We want everyone to know. And I'll say that a couple things in the different training and professional development, in that how you do the training matters. Like how you do it matters. How you do the work is the work. You want to give people the why, as Yasmin said, right? Because that why helps you modify. If you know why you need to do it, you can change it for a library or for outdoor school or for a group program, like it's going to be important. Make it specific. Yasmin, I love that you made a thing like for educators, like do the work to kind of make it very, so people go, okay, great, ready, what do I do? So leaning into that. And then I want to really invite us all to remember young people get the information too. So like we're hosting a young people train the trainer this summer, right? So we want young people to also advocate for this work and understand what's happening to their own bodies. And then my final reflection is from you 3, which is great, is that, it works. It works. And you do see it everywhere. When you start to look at, and you don't have to see it through trauma, you just see how do we create flourishing environments? And for what environments are people not flourishing? And that reminder that it doesn't take much information for big change to happen. And I would imagine with some nods from this group that you teach people a little bit about the brain and the body, and it's like, whoa. And a lot of change happens out of that. So just a real excitement that it works, and a big gratitude to the 3 of you for the work you're doing. I had two kids in outdoor school with two very different experiences, and I appreciate all the adaptation necessary to make those successful. So, thank you all.
Great. Well, thank you. And I will echo that gratitude to all of you for being on our panel, sharing your wisdom with us today, and to all of you for joining us. Please plan to come back in 2 weeks for our final session where we'll dig in on college and career readiness. There's that QR code on screen and the link in the chat. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you all again very soon.